we created Recipe Palette as the best way to discover and keep track of recipes. There's a problem existing on the internet with recipe sharing websites that already exist, and that the current options are less than ideal in many ways. There's sort of two spectrums to keeping track of recipes or discovering them. One is the non-digital side, where users are scribbling in note cards or recipe books, trying to keep track of the best edits to their recipes or writing on top of printed recipes. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there are users who are using these recipe websites that lack features for creating new versions of these recipes or storing them in appropriate ways to link them together. So this kind of results in this issue where recipes are copied, they lose original attribution, they're not tracked very well, and are kind of difficult to collect. As well as this issue that most of these recipe websites that are out there today are cluttered, they're big and bulky and load slow, aren't built with the best technologies and right use cases in mind. Uh, in addition to this problem, there's a lot of people trying to solve it. There's a huge market for recipes on the internet now that we see across some of these websites, like these three of these websites here from the top 1,000 websites globally show that there are hundreds of millions of users looking for recipes. This data is from the last 6 months, but there's a search for this need. People looking for digital recipes and a great way of storing and collecting them. We see these niche tools and sites popping up trying to address some of these problems, but not quite hitting the mark yet, where there's extensions like Recipe Filter with over 40,000 downloads to help users skip straight to recipes and ignore all of the rest of the stuff on a site. Food bloggers are also putting their recipes online and across a variety of fragmented platforms and in different formats for storing them, which makes it hard to find any one good recipe when they're distributed across a variety of mediums. So we started trying to address this problem by rebuilding a platform with modern architecture and then building the proper features that some of these sites lacked. So we rebuilt a platform on top of newer web standards that allowed us to build a site that will scale better and cheaper, um, use the right use cases when they're necessary, and have a cleaner design that makes the site easier to navigate and use. Those kind of things were kind of to build it better, build what already exists, but do it the right way. And then on top of all that, we added in some specific features unique to our site for tracking recipe changes that can actually maintain attribution by creating new versions of recipes very easily. We saw an actual quantifiable um, advantage as we did this, and that our site, by nature of using these better tools, performed better and met best practices better. These numbers come from Google Lighthouse audits, which are a suite of tests that Google runs on websites to see if they perform well or load fast and follow best practices of the web. These numbers come from the top 10 globally ranked cooking and recipe websites and show, frankly, pretty dismal numbers. These are some of the technologies we used in order to get those advantages and build this scalable and reliably. And this is a diagram of kind of how all those pieces play together. In order to make this platform actually good for users, though, we couldn't just build it right. We needed to actually measure what made it valuable for them. So these four numbers, number of recipes, or kind of playing into network effects, whether there's actually recipes on the site users can find and discover, is a big thing that people are looking for. Another thing we measured was system usability scores, or essentially user satisfaction, whether they found the site easy to use and navigate. We already looked at Lighthouse audit scores, but we'll look at those a little more and how these provide a quantifiable advantage for our site. And then a final metric here that whether our site was functional across all devices and tested across platforms and browsers. So as far as the number of recipes go, there are upwards of 50 recipes on Recipe Palette currently on the live app. That number is expected to grow, obviously, because recipes are rarely removed, though this needs to be a key focus in order to make our site more approachable for users. As far as usability scores, we tested these across all stages of our design process and found that out of 100, a score in the 80s is quite good for where we're at, especially. This is gathered across 30 tests, so we can find these numbers to be pretty reliable, and that users actually did find the site easy to log in, create new recipes, and create new versions of recipes. The Lighthouse scores on these audits showed that our site actually outperformed the average from the top 10 recipe websites globally by quite a bit. The exception was in SEO, which was never really a focus for us at this point, though will need to be further down the road. We actually see how this provides an advantage when we look at stats like this. Google's research found on their DoubleClick blog that 53% of all site visitors or site visits are abandoned if the page load takes more than 3 seconds, showing that performance is huge in beginning to build a network of traffic. Finally, the cross-platform compatibility. Our site does run across all devices and on all platforms. Basically, anything that runs a browser can run our site natively and run it well. This is leveraged to PWA technology, or thanks to PWA technology, you can install it on your phone, you can install it on a desktop, you can run it in a browser, really use it anywhere. So in order to make this happen and kind of keep those numbers on track, we were taking these system usability scores at each stage of design. We started with paper sketches where we drew out the app and gave it to users and put it in front of them, asked them to perform specific tasks, took the feedback from that, and built these high fidelity mock-ups on a computer where we then put those in front of a user and had them run through similar tasks. And then finally took that feedback into the live app where we actually developed the real site where users could log in, use it like they would expect from existing applications that they're familiar with, and continue to see improvements and ways that we could keep modifying the app to make it less technical, easier to use, and we've seen system usability scores in the 80s across the whole process. So to discuss a couple of the pieces of strategy and technology that worked well and didn't work as well in this process, our strategy was essentially to create the recipe app that met the needs of the other apps, was up to feature parity with them, and then extended beyond that into this high-end space of something that worked better, worked faster, was more well-designed, and provided these better features. So it worked well, and the people responded positively to those features, like creating new versions or variants of recipes very easily. There were limitations in the messaging of that. How we taught that to users proved difficult because it was kind of new greenfield territory that users hadn't seen before. Meaning we need a better way of messaging that and testing to see if it's actually working. As far as the technology goes, our modern technology worked very well in creating a more performant and more scalable site. There were some limitations in that some key features we hoped to be able to build into our site are not yet offered by some of these technologies we used. So in order to address that, we've set up our site in order to be able to migrate to new features and new updates that are on the roadmap of some of these technologies. And by adopting them, we put ourselves even further ahead of some of the existing solutions. But it's difficult that there need to be some workarounds built into the platform as is. So the takeaways from this is that the new technologies solve the problems well, but they have introduced some other problems that just require different solutions. But a big takeaway is that paring down the product to just the key features actually made it faster and easier to use in a lot of cases. That building it better than the existing solutions was a competitive advantage. And that even if our app lacked the features of creating new versions and variants, we would still have a solution that could compete with some of those other market leaders. So now we'd like to demo the app, show what these features are, how we've built them, how they've been tested, and what's actually possible on the platform.
Welcome to Recipe Palette, the best place to discover and keep track of recipes. When you come to recipepalette.com, this is our landing page that we've created. As we've iterated through different designs, we found that this was the best one that appealed to users and made the most sense. It has a nice header, as well as a easy to access search option right in front. We also have a chance for users to explore popular categories and a brief overview of what Recipe Palette really is, making note of our key features including automatic recipe tracking, the ability to access recipes anywhere, and an advanced search, as well as a chance to sign up for Recipe Palette. Now, one thing that we want to note right off the bat, is that we made Recipe Palette with the intent to make it a PWA, a progressive web app. You can see here that we can actually install this on my machine. Now I am running a seemingly native version of Recipe Palette without having all of the normal link or URL bars, bookmarks, etc. We've also made it so that you can run this as a PWA on iOS and Android. However, those setups are a little bit different, but just as easy. So to start off, I'm going to log in. For our login, we're using Auth0 for all things authentication. And as you can see, we were able to customize it so that we had our Recipe Palette logo and colors. Now that I've logged in, you can see that I have my palette rather than log in and sign up. To start off, we're going to go ahead and look through a category. We're going to look at the bread category. When we pull up the bread category, it actually returns the search results for the given tag or category that we clicked on. Here we can see that we have three recipes tagged with bread: cheesy cornbread rounds, wheat pretzels, and someone created a variant of those wheat pretzels. I think that cheesy cornbread rounds sound like something that would be good to make, so I'm going to click on it. Here we can see this is the view for a recipe. We can clearly see the name of the recipe, the author of it, other details including cook time, prep time, total time, ingredients, instructions, and different tags that this recipe has. We can also see how many people have liked it, and I can bookmark it here. Because I want to make it later, I'm going to bookmark it now. When we bookmark something, we're notified that this has been bookmarked. You can also see here that there's a space for popular variations. This cheesy cornbread rounds recipe does not yet have a variation, but we'll get to that later. Say later on that I want to go and make this recipe, but I couldn't find where it was. I can go to My Palette. My Palette has different options for viewing recipes as well as account options. The first is Recipes. Recipes displays the recipes that I've created or created variations of, as well as the ability to create a new recipe. I have added a peanut butter cookies recipe and made a variant of someone else's zesty garden salsa. Under Hearts, we can see the different things that I've hearted. I've liked my peanut butter cookie recipe as well as someone else's pasta salad. Under Bookmarks, we see everything that we bookmarked. There's the cheesy cornbread rounds that I wanted to make. Under Account, we can see a few details about the profile and have the chance to log out. If we go back to Bookmarks, and I go back to my cheesy cornbread rounds, I look at this and I think, you know what? I don't think that it's going to be cheesy enough with only 1 cup of finely grated cheddar cheese. So I'm going to add a new variation. I want to try making these even cheesier by making them extra cheesy. And I'm going to change the amount of cheese to 2. I'm going to try doubling it. We can see here that everything else was already pre-populated with the information for the original recipe. I don't want to change anything else, but I do want to make a note about what I'm changing here. Doubling the cheese. And I'm going to click Submit. Now, you can see here that it's created a new recipe that is authored by me, but is a variant of that original cornbread rounds recipe. This is the first version that I've created. And we can see that the changes that I've made have been reflected in the title and in the ingredients. If we go back to the original recipe, we'll now see that it has a popular variant, this extra cheesy cornbread rounds. Let's say that I make this recipe and I decide that 2 cups is too much cheese. To make a modification to my recipe, I can come to this edit icon, click it, and it brings me to an edit recipe page. Rather than using 2 cups, I still want them to be extra cheesy, but I think 1.5 cups is going to be sufficient. For my notes here, I'm going to say reduce the amount of cheese. And I'm going to click submit. Now that I've done this, you can see clearly that this is version 2 of my recipe, which reflects that I have made changes to it. I made these and they taste really good, so I'm going to like it now. If I wanted to go back and see the changes that I've made, I can view my edit log. Here I can see that I made my first change was just doubling the cheese, and all that I changed was the name of the ingredients. My latest change was that I reduced the amount of cheese, and I only changed the ingredients. If I view their first recipe, I can see all the changes made only in that version. If I view the second one, or the latest one, I'll see that those changes are reflected here as well. If I go back to my palette, I'll even see that it is now one of my recipes, and it's been added to my hearts because I liked it. So we have created a way to make versions and variants of recipes so that those with food restrictions, dietary preferences, etc. can make the recipes that they desire. We've also made this mobile friendly. So if we come down to a mobile size, you'll see that now our menu is at the bottom with recipes, hearts, bookmarks, account, and searching in easy to access places. The entire site is mobile friendly, and so everything has been optimized for both desktop and mobile. We've also made an advanced search feature that allows us to search by name, ingredient, or tag. If I wanted to search for cookie, I can search for cookie and click submit. I can see all the cookies that have been made here. When I look at the Choco Choco chip cookies, it looks like it has 3 likes and 3 variants based on this card. I can see clearly here that there are 3 hearts and that there have been 3 different variations made of it. I can bookmark this for later once again. When I unbookmark something, I'm also notified that I have unbookmarked it as well. Overall, we feel that Recipe Palette is going to be a great tool for people that are looking to create a perfect recipe or create a variant of a recipe for their own desires.